I'm preemptively saying this because I'm assuming that the next part of his argument is that you can't do this without lanes. But the whole point of prospecting was that they had to chart new lanes.
Yeah.
It's a very complicated mathematical formula, and I won't bore you with a complete breakdown here, but this should allow us to follow.
I have a
no.
bad feeling about this already.
No. We don't even have a canonical or a Legends continuity source for it being 120,000 light years in. What are you saying? In span, in radius, in diameter?
If it were Disney writers inventing hyperspace, then the galaxy would be female, and the hyperspace lanes would be her fallopian tubes. We would all be eggs within Mother Galaxy's womb, and you'd have to ask for consent before ovulating your ship through her hypertubes, otherwise it would be space sexual assault. Now,
that went misogynistically downhill really quickly. All right, so we have a new nugget.
Full disclosure, I'm coming into this blind, so
Yes.
I don't know what we're about to watch. I'm excited. I now I at least know it's a nugget,
Yes.
so that doesn't bode well.
This video was sent to me by a loyal viewer.
I want to come into this blind.
Suffice to say, what we're about to react to is, well, why we do what we do.
hyperspace. Getting you
I
from
got a bad
point A
feeling
to
about
point
this.
B in no time flat since 1977, but not no time flat. Hyperspace isn't teleportation, right? It takes some amount of time, but how
Moves at the
much
speed
time?
of plot.
How fast can you go when traveling through hyperspace? Now, this question has plagued Star Wars writers for decades.
Depends on the class of hyperdrive.
Yeah, it hasn't really plagued the writers. They kind of just accepted the fact that it's just convenience, really. That's when you're putting science into my fantasy.
Pablo Hidalgo, yeah, he literally said it. It works at the speed of plot. People arrive when they need to. They're like wizards.
And while some have put in a great deal of effort to make sure their story adheres to the rules of hyperspace travel,
So, I mean, already we're in the territory of rules in our fantasy.
There are no actual rules. Okay.
I like to say this: there are no rules, but there are things that are unprecedented.
Yeah, it's an unknown unknown. It's kind of like how people thought that a ship that weighs more than air would be it's impossible for it to fly.
Yeah, you told me not to spoil anything. I haven't actually watched this entire thing, but like I know what the title of the video is at the very least. But I will say, in all of fantasy, there are no rules. It's only what the writers want to happen and when to happen. And what we're talking about when we say unprecedented is when they have this really, really important word they always use, and it always appears in Dragon Ball. That's impossible. Yeah.
others
Everything's
prefer to leave it
impossible
vague,
until
or
you do
worse, ignore the matter entirely. But no matter how you slice it, hyperspace travel is and always will be a fundamental part of any story that takes place in the galaxy far, far away. Unless,
Okay.
of course, your story were to take place on a single planet and follow, let's say, a little alien fella named Jumbo as he goes about his day growing grinkle fruit in his garden and getting chickpea grumbo from Trungos. If that's your story, then sure, maybe you don't need to spend time establishing exactly what class of hyperdrive was installed on the cargo ship that imported the chickpeas for Jumbo's grumbo. But since Jumbo, a Star Wars story, is sadly not on the release slate for Lucasfilm, and every story nowadays has to have galaxy-level stakes, then at some point you're going to have to deal with the hyperspace question.
I don't think I agree with the galaxy-wide stakes. There are pretty intimate storylines like Mandalorian, his identity, you know.
I mean, we're about to roll into Skeleton Crew, which doesn't appear to have galaxy-wide consequences, but you know, who knows? We could get there. Rebels didn't, and a ton of books don't, and comics, but it doesn't matter. We can keep going.
I think the MCU is much more guilty of these kind of wide range like stakes, in which in most shows I'm like, well, where are the other Avengers? Because like it's typically a very threatening situation, right? But like the Acolyte was just something on the planet that, you know, they were surveying, and then it was just an incident on that planet that they were covering up, and then like you said, Skeleton Crew Mandalorian is about his identity, and/or it takes place during the Empire, the reign of the Empire, so the stakes are as galactic as that would be.
I do agree, though. In general, we do need smaller stake stories. This was my big complaint about Wolverine and Deadpool, is the plot ended up doing Marvel like nonsense.
So today we're going to take a look at how hyperspace travel has been established to work in the Star Wars galaxy, and then we're going to take a look at how those mechanics have been handled by Star Wars writers in each era of the franchise.
So the first mistake you make is saying that they've established anything about hyperspace. There are things that are said about it, but again, diegetically, that's just what people in the universe or the galaxy knows about it.
Yeah.
Beginning with the original trilogy, expanded universe, and the prequels, and then, despite my family's concern for my mental well-being, we will take a look at the Disney era and explore all the ways it has taken a massive acolyte all over that pre-established lore. But
yeah, and this is where the nugget comes in.
Before we can talk about hyperspace travel,
yeah, as someone who's read copious Mental Legends books, no, it hasn't been affected at all.
Yeah,
whatsoever.
But if you missed it, he said how Disney took a massive acolyte.
Yeah.
Travel, we should first take a look at the galaxy we're traveling in. This is the Star Wars galaxy. From one end to the other, it spans nearly 120,000 light years.
I wish I could zoom in, but that looks like a very outdated map.
Yeah, that's not the correct map. And also,
well, yeah, source for the 120,000 light years.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of light years. The bright center here represents the core systems. This includes the shining galactic capital Coruscant, where the Jedi Temple and Senate reside, and the cold, dark, debris-ridden abyss where Alderaan used to be. Zooming out past the core colonies, we reach the Inner Rim, Expansion Region, and Mid-Rim, featuring such landmarks as...
Now we know it's a really, really old map, because the Mid-Rim is not the Expansion Region.
Yeah, I think he meant to say the colonies, but
I mean, the Mid-Rim was expansion territory during the High Republic, and older, because during the High Republic they're trying to expand towards the Outer Rim.
Yeah.
This Naboo, Kashyyyk, and Toydaria. Outside the Mid-Rim, we have the appropriately named Outer Rim, which features more rural systems such as Mon Calamari, Mustafar, Nal Hutta, and of course the planet Disney Star Wars thinks is the center of the galaxy, Tatooine. Beyond that, we have...
How is that a Disney thing?
No. George Lucas Star Wars thinks that's the center. We've gotten a lot more places than ever before for things that...
Absolutely. We got Peridia, of all things, in wild space. Yeah. Listen, George Lucas started it on Tatooine, which kind of... He wrote himself into a corner because Anakin's also from Tatooine. So in the prequels, we're in Tatooine, and he goes to Coruscant, he trains as a Jedi, becomes a Jedi, and then the twins are brought back to Tatooine, or at least Luke is, and that's
where Obi-Wan lives, and yeah, I mean, yeah, sure, the Mandalorian didn't need to go back there, and I feel like this is the type of person that loves the Mandalorian, you know. But whatever.
Well, I mean, for sure, there's some bias here, but the Disney era didn't just. It just doesn't think that Tatooine is the center of the galaxy. I mean, even in The Mandalorian, they went back to Tatooine, but we got like Corvus, we got Arvala 7, we got a whole bunch of different planets, and we went to Kalevala and Mandalore for Pete's sake.
Have the unknown regions and wild space. Not too many notable systems out here, as these areas are, well, wild and unknown, but there are a few key events that take place out here, so I want to make sure I mention them too. Of course, no matter
Exegol.
where we're traveling in the galaxy, we can't just fly there in a
Octo.
straight line, because, as we know,
Traveling through hyperspace ain't like dust and crops, boy. Without precise calculations, we'd fly right through a star or bounce too close to a supernova and then an injured trip real quick, wouldn't we?
so in order to avoid these dangers, we need to follow hyperspace lanes, which are basically pre-established highways and trade routes used.
They're not pre-established, they're prospected. They are discovered. They didn't just wake up with hyperspace technology and say and discover, oh, there's lanes we can use. No, they were traveled, and so therefore, I'm preemptively saying this because I'm assuming that the next part of his argument is that you can't do this without lanes, but the whole point of prospecting was that they had to chart new lanes.
Yeah.
Just to safely travel the galaxy. The winner of 2 victory points for longest road goes to this hyperspace lane called the Hydean Way, but there are thousands of hyperspace lanes connecting every known inhabited system with all the others. So in order to be precise when measuring distances on this map, we're going to need a way to follow these hyperspace lanes as closely as possible, which is why I have devised this highly scientific method for determining the true distance between systems. It's a very complicated mathematical formula, and I won't bore you with a complete breakdown here, but this should allow us to follow.
I have a bad feeling about this already.
No. We don't even have a canonical or a Legends continuity source for it being 120,000 light years in. What are you saying? In span, in radius, in diameter?
I think he's trying to say in diameter, but so he made up the calculation. It's an outdated map. It's also not quite how hyperspace works, and also the type of hyperdrive you have also plays a factor. But like, you're not stuck on a hyperspace lane as well. Like,
yeah, I don't understand where he's getting these lanes or the diagram of these lanes.
Besides taking weird shots at things that don't deserve to be shots, this is just a dude that just doesn't know what he's talking about.
If you dossy it up like that, yeah.
Follow these hyperspace lanes as accurately as possible as we walk through this analysis. Now,
the one thing I can say before he goes into anything else is that no, you don't jump into hyperspace and your ship is going like this around the galaxy. A hyperspace lane is literally a wormhole that has been charted to be a route that has 0 mass shadows, which is generated by celestial bodies in real space. That's it. It's not like this squiggly noodle that...
Yeah, it's not a freeway that, like, if someone is cruising past this direction, you're going to run into them or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. This is already weird.
Also, we have to take into consideration naturally occurring phenomena, which is the purgles.
So they can enter hyperspace.
Yeah, the purgles can enter hyperspace and they don't use lanes. So that already is just at least proof that you don't need lanes. It's just for their safety that they use lanes because it's known to be safe. That's why they prospected them. But purgle just travel instinctively through hyperspace. And it doesn't mean that they also do this around things either.
Before we embark on our first hyperspace journey, we're going to need the ability to actually enter hyperspace. What is hyperspace, you ask? Good question. I probably should have started with that.
Faster than light travel?
The truth is, we don't fully know. The best explanation I can gather is that hyperspace is some sort of fourth dimension that exists parallel to ours and still interacts with ours, but in which you are able to move through space much, much faster. It's a bit ethereal and...
Yes. So your hyperdrive engine, depending on which class, will enable you to travel FTL, which then grants you access to the hyperspace dimension.
vague, but that's honestly to its benefit. If it were Disney writers inventing hyperspace, then the galaxy would be female, and the hyperspace lanes would be her fallopian tubes. We would all be eggs within Mother Galaxy's womb, and you'd have to ask for consent before ovulating your ship through her hypertubes, otherwise it would be space sexual assault. Now,
that went misogynistically downhill really quickly. We'll address the misogyny in a bit, but
it's just so dumb. I mean, like, this nothing they've written has been female. Like no one's gender at any point in any Star Wars story has played any part in the actual story. I feel like he's making
let alone
reference
hyperspace.
he's making reference to the Nike campaign, The Force is Female, where they were trying to sell Air Force Ones because Nike was sponsoring the event to sell shoes to women in the arts.
I mean, for the nth time, we have to say that, yeah.
Yeah. So it's for shoes in 2017, and if you still think that, you're an idiot. But this is just to go on a little rant. This is the problem with the Nugget Kingdom. This stuff, this hate, this vitriol that they experience is built on top of things, but all of the layers are lies. Like none of it happened. And so they feel entitled because, like, oh, Disney has done so much stuff over these past few years. And you're like what? Well, for the acolyte to sit, and you're like, no, that's not what she said either. Ryan Johnson said people, man, no, he said people who attack actors because they didn't like the character are man babies. If that's what you're doing, then yeah, he's talking to you, and it's all these layers built on each other, and they are all garbage.
Now, to his point right here, which isn't really a point, when he says Disney writers, they're not Disney writers. There are writers hired to do a show. Like, Disney doesn't have resident writers that they can just throw at a project whenever they want. They have to hire directors, showrunners, and writers.
The people that make up the lore and confirm things is the Lucasfilm Story Group, which were the same people who were working under George Lucas.
Mm-hmm. Namely Filoni. So
Filoni and Hidalgo.
Filoni, Hidalgo, I think Carrie Hart was there too, but she was Lucasfilm. She was Lucasfilm before, yeah. A lot of the people have been there forever, and so it's weird to be like, well, Disney owns them now, so no, it's Disney writer. And you're like, I wrote this, so it's different than the thing I wrote yesterday. I don't know. A big example.
This brain dead.
A big example is that Lawrence Kasdan wrote for the original trilogy, and he wrote for the sequels too. Yeah. But like, just to kind of dispel this weird ass notion, all George did was sell Lucasfilm. Disney didn't buy the rights to the property and replace the entire studio with all of their people. Like, he literally sold the studio. It's like if I worked at a game studio and the game studio was acquired, we would all still work there unless they laid us all off, but which is what's been happening for the past year. But like, yeah, when you're acquired by a parent company, everybody still works there. They're same people. It's just you have a new executive boss. But everyone at Lucasfilm that's currently there, at least for the most part, was there under George Lucas.
The first mention of a ship's hyperdrive is delivered by the one and only Captain Solo. He claims that the drive aboard the Falcon can make 0.5 past light speed. Now, those of you who paid attention in science class may already know that a mere 50% faster than the speed of light is really not that fast on a galactic scale.
No, he doesn't mean 50% faster than light. He just means 0.5 FTL. Like, we don't have solid numbers for all of this stuff, but it's the same thing as saying making the Kessel run in 12 parsecs. It's kind of meaningless. It's arbitrary.
Yeah, it's fine. The 12 parsecs thing was intended, like the notes in the original script was as a nonsense brag. Yeah. But since then we put lore and stuff around it, so which is what it is. But Um, what did he just say? He just said like if you pay attention in science class, that's not very fast. No, if you pay attention in science class, that is physically impossible. If you take,
It's also
like there's not enough matter ever in existence that to get you up to that speed. If you're talking speed, which we actually aren't talking speed.
299,792,458 meters per second, or 1 billion, approximately 1 billion kilometers per hour. And you're saying 50% faster than that, which would probably be around 1.5 billion, if I'm doing my math right, is not fast.
Yeah, but like literally, if you pay attention in science class, if you're trying to make physical mass past the speed of light, it's not possible, right? Because a rocket engine shoots stuff out of the back to propel it forward, right? There's not enough stuff in the galaxy to shoot out the back that will make something with physical mass surpass the speed of light.
Right.
But I mean, that's kind of the point. That's why you're entering a different.
It's
a
the
different
conversion
dimension.
of energy.
Yeah.
In fact, flying from Tatooine to Alderaan at 1.5 times the speed of light would take the Falcon nearly 32,000 years.
Okay, well, we've already established that he didn't mean 1.5 times the speed of light. It's an arbitrary number of him giving, the power of his hyperdrive class.
But relatively slow, so they're typically used when speed is not a necessity. Class 2 hyperdrives are commonly seen in military.
So what does that mean? Does the class 4 mean it's 4 times the speed of light, but they're slow? See, this is why these are arbitrary numbers.
Now, modifying a hyperdrive to be...
Where is he getting this info?
I assume he's just regurgitating something that someone wrote on a forum somewhere.
Yeah, because I feel like besides the fact that all of these numbers are arbitrary because class 5 is supposedly the fastest on this tier list, but if he took 0.5 to be 50% faster, then class 4 would be the fastest. So already that doesn't make sense. But before the First Order introduced hyperspace tracking, you could outrun anybody in any class hyperdrive because they couldn't track you through hyperspace. It wasn't about speed. If we were talking about speed and outrunning anything in space, you would be talking about sublights.
Faster than a
Yeah.
class 1 is not...
Well, I will say there is something to be said, which specifically, I think this happens in A New Dawn as well as... does it happen in one of the Thrawn books? I don't know. But you do have cases where two ships are going to the same location.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you'll have, the rebels, jump to hyperspace while they're being chased by a Star Destroyer. And then when they get there, that Star Destroyer is already there. And that's just kind of funny. But
that's in those circumstances when they know where they're going.
Yeah.
Technically legal, but if you're the scoundrel type who likes to make special modifications yourself, you might be able to tinker with it and squeeze out a bit more speed, maybe even enough to make 0.5. Now, this is all
moot at this point because he's taking 0.5 to mean a certain percentage, yet class 4s are supposedly slower.
Questions like, why did Yord fly from Ueda to Coruscant, and then when he realized that the prisoner transport didn't arrive, fly from Coruscant to Karlak, collect the escaped prisoners, but not investigate the crashed ship, instead taking the prisoners back to Coruscant, only to then fly all the way back to Karlak with Master Sold to investigate the crashed ship that they should have investigated earlier, the main question being, how the hell did they do all that before Osha froze to death? But I'm getting it.
Right, because hyperspeed is the speed of plot. Also, what? Let's run that back really quickly.
Questions like, why did Yord fly from Ueda to Coruscant, and then when he realized that the prisoner transport didn't arrive, fly from Coruscant to Karlak?
Because he had to report to the council. And when he reported to the council, a soul was assigned to the case, and he brought Yord with him.
Yeah. I don't.
Hey, like this is all stuff that happens in the show.
This is it's so dumb. Oh my goodness. Okay, so the Jedi are not the police, right? So they did arrest the people, but they are going to be processed in prison and stuff like that by the Republic. So they put him on a Republic prison transport and go, and then he goes about his business to do whatever he needs to do. Who said that Yord was the one who had to go back to round up the prisoners that were on the escape pods?
No one.
No one. No. You know why? Because he didn't. He wouldn't. That doesn't make sense. But, yeah, he went to the temple, and then they find out that their Jedi prisoner, former Jedi prisoner, is escaped, and only another Jedi is going to be able to track him down. So they went back to get him. He just like made up a problem and then complained about the thing he made up in his head.
Yeah, it really does kind of come down to a lot of people. Really, why shouldn't they do this in any given show? But we can steel man that in any show. Like, if a character in House of the Dragon chose to walk down the left path, we were like, well, why didn't he go in the right path? That's just what happened. Also, those were Republic prisoners. Osha was the one that they were sent to inquire about. They were a person of interest because she was a Jedi, or a former Jedi.
Back to Karlak with Master Sold to investigate the crashed ship that they should have investigated earlier. The main question being, how the hell did they do all that before Osha froze to death?
What speed hyperdrive was your ship?
And those Jedis, they be on that 0.1, the fastest.
Again, there's just I don't know. It's weird.
He created the problem, like you said.
This jump takes them from Tatooine down here in the Outer Rim all the way to the Alderaan system up here in the Core Worlds. This is a distance of roughly 48,500 light years.
I moved to strike that from the record because, again, his measurements suck.
Give or take some spaghetti, and it appears to take not very long at all. Han mentions that they should be arriving at Alderaan around 0200 hours, but we don't really have a grid for what this means.
So he just admitted that he has no. What is his point? What is he trying to say? Basically, he just said it's this long, but we don't know how long it took, and they told what time we arrived, but we don't know what that means. What was he measuring with the spaghetti? It's a visual. It's a cool visual.
He keeps on saying he's getting ahead of himself, but I think he's lost the plot already.
Time Luke leaves the moisture farm early in the morning to look for R2-D2 until the Death Star is destroyed appears to take place on the same day. This means that not only did they make the jump from
appears to have taken place on the same day. How was that established? Because space just looks like that. You can't, there's no day and night cycle. He leaves in the morning, you see, because Tatooine has two suns and a day and night cycle, but then you
what is a day?
Movie from the time Luke leaves the moisture farm early in the morning to look for R2-D2 until the Death Star is destroyed appears to take place on the same day. This means that not only did they make the jump from Tatooine to Alderaan within 24 hours, but also the jump from Alderaan to Yavin, which is a very similar jump at about 42,000 light years. Now that is an insane distance to travel in a single day. And
yeah, we're just going to disregard all of these arbitrary numbers that he's come up with.
The first map that's considered to be fully canon didn't come out until 2002, and the most recently updated one, the one that I'm using today, was released in 2009.
This video is 3 months old. How are you using a 2009 map?
Yeah, that's not accurate.
Director, cut, ding. I would like to submit for the court a current map of the galaxy released in 2020. Star Wars book? Bro, you made this video 3 months ago. You couldn't have, I don't know, looked it up 2009?
These distances are much more reasonable for ships to fly in accordance with the movie's timeline of events.
And these distances are arbitrary and did not exist when the movies came out.
I mean, canonically speaking, Luke trained with Yoda for a couple of weeks, from evacuating Hoth to everything that happened on Bespin. That was a few weeks, and we know that a lot of that was sublight travel, yes, but like, I don't know how he's, and also just because.
Well, the whole argument is bunk. It's already fallacious to begin with because, again, like you said, the layers are all lies, or not.
Yeah.
And in this case, really just kind of misinformation.
So to recap, everyone, we have an incorrect map, incorrect measuring system, unknown timelines,
unknown speeds, because arbitrarily he just said 0.5 was 50% of light speed, or 50% faster than light speed.
Because I also would like to point out that everything in this galaxy is moving.
We're approaching Flurfer territory, but like, no, this is not a stationary galaxy where everything is where it is on this map at all times.
That's why routes have to be specific, because hyperspace route isn't always safe.
So it's therefore reasonable to assume that the same logic was in mind when writing 77. But even if...
No, it's not reasonable.
Why would you assume that?
They didn't have this map back then. They didn't have your measurements back then. How is it reasonable to assume that they had this in mind in 77?
Starships were originally meant to be able to traverse the entire galaxy in a single day, that all changed with the emergence of the expanded universe, bringing with it a deeper and more concrete understanding of hyperspace travel. Let's talk about the Thrawn
Empire
books
Strikes Back. They didn't traverse it in one day, so I don't know. And Return of the Jedi and A New Hope, we don't know how long it took. It all looks like night because that's how space looks.
Now, for anyone watching this who's had the misfortune of getting into Star Wars for the first time in current year, you'll be interested to know that Grand Admiral Thrawn wasn't always a fat, coke-guzzling megalomaniac.
For anyone who has had the misfortune of hearing this guy talk about Star Wars, I'm sorry. Because that's Lars Mikkelsen. That is Thrawn. Right? I don't know. Is he unfamiliar with the person that played Thrawn in Rebels? Like, I mean,
is he unfamiliar with the unceremonious death of Thrawn in the expanded universe?
I'm sure he's operating on a limited and cherry-picked set of data. I think I'm comfortable saying now that he's a tourist
with mommy issues who gets constantly outsmarted by actual children.
No.
Why would he have mommy issues? And he doesn't get outsmarted by children. He's unable to factor in the Force because he can't doesn't understand it. You know, the Force and politics are two things that he's terrible at. That's like a thing.
Apparently, people have this.
He doesn't know anything about Thrawn. Why is he?
He thinks that, just like the Revan Glazers, he's the best everything. He's a master tactician. He's a master martial artist, and he shouldn't be defeated by Ezra, who is an accomplished Force user and trained by Kanan.
Upon a time, Thrawn actually posed a true threat to the fledgling New Republic and was characterized as a highly competent and highly dangerous enemy. The man who put so much work into crafting such a well-realized villain, Timothy Zahn,
Timothy Zahn consulted on Thrawn in Ahsoka.
Yeah, and he wrote all the canon Thrawn books. He's written all the Thrawn books.
Yes. And when he says that he is a competent and lethal enemy, he does not mean that he is unstoppable. Palpatine, in regards to the Force, was very competent and lethal and threatening. Yet all it took to end him in the original trilogy was to throw him down a shaft.
same level of
Shaft.
care into being consistent with his hyperspace rules. He took George's galaxy and made it feel galactic, and that philosophy was carried into the rest of the EU. There are so many times that
I'd like to know more about your thoughts on the EU.
Well, Timothy Zahn does do a great job with explaining hyperspace and stuff like that throughout his books, but like he does that in canon, Star Wars as well. Like it's there has literally been no change. He actually explains it more in the canon stories than he did previously. Maybe with the exception of Outbound Flight. No, but Outbound Flight was like way off in the butt crack of nowhere. No, all of the cool hyperspace stuff happens in Timothy Zahn's canon books. It's actually kind of cool because the Grisks create these like hyperspace buoys that act like Indictor cruisers, but it's like but it's like a thing. It's not an entire ship, so they can drop them off, and then Thrawn uses those as backstops in the stories, so he can just make a jump knowing he'll be pulled out at a specific spot. There's some cool stuff in there, but like this guy doesn't know anything about what he's talking about.
Which is also, I would like to clarify, which is also an exploit of the safety systems. It is not a rule about gravity wells.
Yes. It is dangerous when you hit a gravity well, and so your hyperdrive will have a failsafe where it drops you out of hyperspace to prevent you from flying directly into a star or a planet. It can be bypassed, and we've seen that happen in, for instance, the Clone Wars, when Anakin makes the Malevolence hyper jump into a planet in order to destroy it.
Yeah. So basically, whenever they do jump from a gravity well or a planetary orbit, they remove those safety restrictions. And the interdictors exploit the safety restrictions or protocols, I would say. Another instance of this is in Clone Wars, when those safety measures and the hyperdrive malfunctions with Aayla Secura on board, and they inadvertently jump to hyperspace. When
they have to drop out of the other ship so that they don't destroy it. Yeah. Great episode.
Where characters need to travel to a specific system, and they have to have serious discussions about how many days or even weeks it will take to reach that destination, what preparations need to be made along the way, and what they expect to find when they arrive, as their current information may be days or weeks out of date on arrival. This gives room to show strategy.
The only reason they're discussing that is because there are certain routes they need to avoid because of the Trade Federation, blockade. And they discussed this in the middle of that scene too, when they said that they have to reroute to Tatooine, and they're discussing, well, that's Hutt territory. So like the only times they're really discussing how much time they're going to take is how much time they're going to spend trying to get around certain territories and blockades.
Tatooine. It's small, out of the way, poor. The Trade Federation have no presence there.
How can you be sure?
It's controlled by the Hutts.
You can't take her Royal Highness there. The Hutts are gangsters. If they discovered her...
It would be no different than if we landed on a system controlled by the Federation. Except that the Hutts aren't looking for her.
When The Rise of Skywalker introduced hyperspace skipping, planets flashing by so fast you don't...
Not planets.
Yeah, none of them were planets.
Don't even have time to blink. Suddenly the whole galaxy felt like it was crashing in around us, like there was no more concept of space in space.
Huh?
How?
I'm trying to reconcile with jumping to these locations making the galaxy feel smaller. Like none of these locations are recognizable. They're not familiar. They're new. So it's not like he's skipping around to like... If they were planets, he's not skipping around to Tatooine and then back to Dantooine and back to Coruscant. Like these are like out in the middle of the galaxy somewhere. The crystal spires of Evexia we've never heard of. He starts off from the Cinta Glacier, which isn't a planet. It's an asteroid. The crystal spires is a natural space phenomena that is floating out in space, even though you can see an atmosphere. It's not an atmosphere, and that's largely because of its reflective nature. Then they skip to the Typhonic Nebula.
Typhonic Nebula, yeah.
And that's the green stuff. The crystal chaos of Cardavite. That is like those like stalactites. That wasn't a planet either. It's just, again, it's a space phenomena that has a bunch of these spires.
He didn't do his homework. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah. But even then, the existence of all of these like weird phenomena in space means that the galaxy is larger than you thought, you know? Moving on.
Suddenly the galaxy felt claustrophobic and small.
No, it didn't.
Star Wars wasn't fun anymore.
You want to make the galaxy feel small? Watch the prequel trilogy.
Okay, but saying it's not fun. If you're not having fun, that's okay. That's fair. That's your opinion. That's valid. But like, because you don't know what hyperspace skipping is, it's no longer fun. Like, that's a fun sequence. I don't like Rise of Skywalker as a film, but it's a fun film.
But I just think basing this conclusion off of skipping, when the first movie was Tatooine, Alderaan space, the second movie was Hoth, Dagobah, and then Bespin.
Yeah, jumping to more places and seeing more phenomenon and different looking areas, making the galaxy feel smaller it's kind of a brain dead take. I'm sorry.
The argument I hear all the time is that hyperspace travel is boring and we need to get back to the plot, but
this is another one of those kind of fallacious appeals to the phantom, really. It's the argument I keep hearing. Who's making that argument? Because I've never made, neither of us have made the argument that the galaxy feels smaller or hyperspace feels, what is it? What do you say?
The argument I hear all the time is that hyperspace travel is boring. And
no one that I know. Choco,
I don't think it's boring. I think it's very interesting.
You don't have time for moments like that if your characters just teleport to their destination immediately.
Shout out to Ahsoka for showing the training of Sabine during their hyperspace travel.
Not to mention you miss out on
I thought you didn't have time for that.
There's also a lot of development with Din Djarin and Grogu in hyperspace.
Yeah.
There's
Yord spoke to Osha during hyperspace. We have so many scenes that happen during hyperspace travel. I feel like at this point, and I'll reveal the channel name, Max of Zorro just doesn't pay attention and spends his time measuring out noodles to represent an arbitrary measuring stick of the galaxy.
Imagine planes, trains, and automobiles, but instead it's freighters, fighters, and battle cruisers.
Did that ever happen in Heir to the Empire? Were they in hyperspace for weeks?
No, that's never stated. And what's funny is it's actually the opposite of that, because like one of the big things of actually the whole Last Command Druis is on planet. He's not traveling with Thrawn.
If you've made it this far into the video, I just want to put out a general word to the wise, or in this case, a clarification. This whole video so far has provided no sources other than naming titles of books.
But he's wrong about what happens in the books.
Well, even then, what I'm saying is he's just naming this happens in the book, doesn't give a citation as to the page or the text. You know, there's no citation. It's just, this book. And then he talks about, he editorializes afterwards. Right? There's no like ipso facto.
But he's using, there's interesting stories that take place when people are traveling in hyperspace. And like, it's true, but like a lot of both the expanded universe and the original the pre-Disney Star Wars skip over those parts. Sometimes they explore them, and a lot of canon explores those parts or skips over them depending on what's needed.
That's why hyperspace travels at the speed of plot. Because if the large part of the plot includes dialogue that happens during hyperspace, then it'll happen during hyperspace. If it doesn't, then it doesn't.
Anyway, the last thing I want to quickly mention before we leave the EU has nothing to do with hyperspace. It's just a really good book. Star Wars Allegiance. It tells the story of 5
fantastic book. Nobody talks about this book. I love this book so much. One of my favorite books.
Troopers who defected from the Empire after the destruction of Alderaan and became
Is this the
vigilantes.
basis for
it was the Bad Batch before the Bad.
No, that's not what happens in the book. Okay, so the plot of Allegiance is it's a group of stormtroopers, and there's a mission. But these are like the local stormtrooper boys, right? These are the people who are from this planet in the local garrison, and then like you have the core one, the people from the Empire who come in to handle things. They execute everyone in this like whole city because they think they're rebels. And these guys, it doesn't sit well with them. But much like the Romans, they get conscripted to go with this Empire crew. And so their commander, like this ISB agent, starts giving their commander some lip, and it elevates into a fist fight. And then a knife comes out, and they accidentally kill this ISB guy. And they're like, ride or die. And so they all just defect, like they steal a bunch of ISB stuff, and they dip out. But they're stormtroopers, but they are considers themselves to be good guys. So they like protect people and solve crimes as a unit, while they're like trying to like hide because they are being stormtroopers, but they know that the Empire is actually going to come after them. Then they get intertwined with Mara Jade. It's a whole thing. Fantastic book. This guy didn't read it.
It's a really good book. Star Wars Allegiance. It tells the story of 5 stormtroopers who defected from the Empire after the destruction of Alderaan and became vigilantes. It was the Bad Batch before the Bad Batch, but done better. And instead of
it was nothing like the Bad Batch.
Yeah, no, not at all.
A leather-clad Mara Jade at the height of her power as the Emperor's hand. Now that's a trade I would not dispute. Speaking of
also, the Bad Batch is better written, but I still enjoy that book. he just wants to sexualize women, I guess.
The first time we hear the word hyperdrive spoken on film in over 2.5 decades is by Captain Badass of the Naboo around the 26-minute mark of The Phantom Menace. He says that the hyperdrive is leaking. What could the hyperdrive be leaking, you may wonder? Don't know. It's not leaking.
Coaxium? Don't know. Bro, I keep on mentioning this video came out 3 months ago. The information is there.
Fuel. Hyperdrives don't have fuel, Ryan.
They do! Oh my gosh!
They've always had fuel.
The hyperdrive is leaking. We'll have to land somewhere to refuel and repair the ship. To refuel and repair the ship. To refuel and repair the ship.
Reactor-based, operating on a substance called hypermatter to propel the ship into hyperspace.
Hyperdrives are powered by reactors. It's a power source. It's talking about the generator.
And a leak in the coolant system could cause the hyperdrive to thermal throttle, which could...
Okay, all of this, it's bunk already because
he's
fuel.
Just wrong.
There's fuel.
Could make the hyperdrive malfunction. But whether it's coolant that's leaking...
Also, this reference to The Last Jedi was about sublight fuel. Like they did have they
No, he said we
they had
enough
enough
have fuel for one
more jump, right? But the fuel that was like that creating the stakes was sublights to remain faster than the supremacy,
which is essentially just a little bit faster than a class 2 hyperdrive. This amuses.
Okay, he's just using numbers and be like, okay, well, that's just a little bit fast.
And how they must have paid extra for the Class 1.8 Hyperdrive just so they could brag to their rich friends about the Class 1 part, conveniently forgetting to mention the .8.
Or, hear me out, it's just like cars, and there's a V6 available and a V8. There's a 4-cylinder, a 6-cylinder. There's models that you buy, right? I mean, of course, there's tinkerers and modders out there that will change, like just like Pelimato did with the N1 for Mando. But like, no, they don't just like buy. Oh, can I put like a .8 up there on my Hyperdrive just so I could brag to my rich friends?
There's not too much to say about these two jumps since there's no real timeline given, and anyway, who cares, because now it's time to talk about the Duel of the Fates. So the style of combat,
Which has nothing to do with hyperspace?
Whoops, my bad. I guess we'll have to save that for another video.
Which we're going to delightfully react to and bunk as well.
Hopping over into Attack of the Clones, we get a total of 9 hyperspace routes flown in this film, either shown or implied. Coruscant to Naboo, Coruscant to Kamino, Naboo to Tatooine, Kamino to Geonosis, Tatooine to Geonosis, Coruscant to Kamino to Geonosis, or Kamino to Coruscant to Geonosis, or maybe they met in the middle, and finally Geonosis to Coruscant and Geonosis to Naboo. Nothing.
I know we've already bunked how arbitrary his numbers and his map is, but like, I just want to, for posterity, this is all dumb.
So how the hell are these sun-powered sails doing anything at all? And
They collect solar radiation and store it. Does he think solar panels can only work when the sun is out? Does he not know about batteries?
sublight travel. That would be stupid enough, but no, they're definitely supposed to be hyperspace sails.
You can clearly see there's a sublight on this ship.
See, the sails are open when he enters hyperspace
2 sublights.
outside of Geonosis, and they're still open when he exits hyperspace outside of Coruscant.
I gotta hand it to the Bothans, though. I mean, Green New Deal.
This is so inordinately dumb, especially compared to the hyperdrive ring.
Let me present one
He wore a
possibility.
cape as a Jedi.
Let me present one possibility. The Bothans don't have access to the Republic hyperspace rings. You know,
Different cultures make different things because they move along different lines. Just like the Naboo starships.
I also imagine
For
that like you would
income.
need access codes.
That brings us to Revenge of the Sith, and honestly, it's not even a contest. This is the
So
most
then he's admitting that there were issues with hyperdrives in hyperspace and earlier. Okay, go ahead.
I don't think there were issues.
Oh no, but he's saying that
Yeah.
there are issues.
convoluted hyperspace travel gets in the prequels, despite the fact that the first third of the movie takes place entirely on Coruscant. That should give you a hint as to how tangled and twisted it gets in the back half. Now, Obi-Wan has plenty of time to get to Utapau since there's no real timeline given. And
There's a reason there's no timelines given at all.
There's no
Issue
timeline in any of them given.
Anakin leaves Coruscant and flies to Mustafar to eliminate the remaining Separatist leaders. About a day and a half flight, and he
Where do you get that?
Who says it's a day and a half?
Also, like Obi-Wan and Padme catch up to him just after he's murdered the Separatist leaders. So
Yeah.
did they also was he also staring at the volcano for a day and a half while waiting for them?
He might have just been walking through a hall full of bodies and
Just
stuff.
crying.
I don't know.
flew to the Tantive 4, flew to Coruscant, investigated the temple, and then flew to Mustafar on Padme's ship. That whole trip should have taken, 10 days?
Again, well, you're running into issues because your barometer or your measuring stick for hyperspace travel is wrong. So
Jumping straight into
we
The
jumped
Force
straight
Awakens, we
to
get
the
our
sequels
first big
because
question mark regarding
It
hyperspace
was so
travel.
dumb, I couldn't-
And
we couldn't do
Poe
it.
steal a
I
TIE
couldn't
fighter
do
in an
it.
attempt to escape the First Order. But escape where? Standard TIE fighters don't have hyperdrives.
First Order SFs do. Yes, they were all equipped with them.
Wait a minute, these TIE fighters don't have hyperdrives, do they?
They
Hold
do.
on a second. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry. I
It's not a TIE fighter. It's a TIE SF.
just had to make sure JJ hadn't broken canon by shoving a hyperdrive into a TIE fighter. That would be crazy. But
you get to fly them as a different ship in like the Battlefront games, right? That's why there's 2 seats, like one for a gunner. Like those are they are different. It was Special Forces TIE fighter, and yeah, they do have it as well as Imperial TIE Scouts.
I think the first Hyperdrive in a TIE was the Defender, right? TIE Advanced?
TIE Advance had one.
But yeah, the ones being used in The Force Awakens are First Order. I mean, the answer is in this frame. It's staring him in the face. First Order. It's not the Empire.
Standard First Order TIEs are not equipped with hyperdrives.
Standard are not.
Right. But
he didn't take a standard, so it's nonsense. It's a nonsense point.
Like Chaco said, the one that he took had 2 seats. That's an SFO.
But if there's no hyperdrive, then what exactly was Finn's plan once they stole the TIE? The next scene involving...
So, need I remind you that the droid they were looking for in the original trilogy got away from the Empire by going back down to Tatooine? Sure, they said there's no life forms, hold your fire. But going down to a planet is a pretty good way of losing your pursuers. It's a big planet.
Hyperspace is aboard the Falcon. Finn and Princess Palpatine have just miraculously escaped to death by laser blast and made it into orbit over Jakku, when out of nowhere a massive freighter appears and eats the Falcon. Hey look, it's Chewie, and Han's so old, but how? It's been less than 10 minutes.
I don't appreciate that. Harrison Ford's a legend.
How did they even know where to get to?
They didn't.
Where'd you get this ship?
Nima Outpost.
Jakku? That junkyard?
Thank you, junkyard.
Told you we should have double-checked the western reaches.
They had a beacon on the Millennium Falcon. It had flown for years, which is why they wasn't able to track it down before. If they were able to get to it fast enough, that would imply that they were nearby. But also, we have no idea how long they were there for. Yeah. Like, it's unlikely that they were just chilling in orbit with with the First Order above them.
Scanning for a ship's passive frequency?
They were scanning for a specific frequency.
Scan the entire known universe for the Radis's frequency and find them that way. Problem solved.
Because they didn't have the frequency.
Double-check the western reaches.
There's no time to think about any of that, because now we get to witness our first on-screen hyperspace jump in over 30 years, during which Rey gets the honor of fixing something on Han's ship that he couldn't figure out himself.
Because, see, I totally called it. He couldn't have fixed it himself because he knew, he said some milker installed a compressor on the hyperdrive, and Rey is the one who knew where it was installed.
Hey, some moof milker put a compressor on the ignition line.
Unkar plucked it. I thought it was a mistake too. Puts too much stress on the hyperdrive.
Also, it's kind of a common thing that Han is not good at fixing the Falcon. Chewie's the one who fixes the Falcon.
They're not. They're coming from Starkiller Base. Wait, what? They were just on Jakku 5 seconds ago.
Does the First Order have one ship? If the First Order is at Starkiller, or they were on Jakku, they can't possibly have left from... Oh, man. This is getting worse and worse.
That's so stupid. Look how far away it is. Do you realize how bad...
Your map sucks.
The First Order and the Resistance are alerted at the same time, and the Resistance is presumably coming from their base on Dakar.
He says they were alerted at the same time. Says who?
The first variable I think of is, how do you know she's contacting the First Order directly?
And it gets worse. After Kylo kidnaps Rey, he takes her back to Starkiller. Seriously? Why?
This guy sounds like, honestly, he sounds like a Jeremy wannabe. He sounds like someone who thinks he could sin these movies without knowing anything about these movies.
Finale? I'm thinking it's because they need to be on Starkiller for the finale. And on top of all of...
I mean, if that's what the plot demands, then they do need to be on Starkiller Base for the finale. There's nothing wrong with that inherently, you know? Why did they need to have the fight on Mustafar?
Because they had the fight on Mustafar? Because it was a cool looking set piece for the finale? Yeah, it's a weird... he's like, why didn't he interrogate her on the ship?
Also, she was knocked out the entire time.
Yeah, being unconscious does affect your ability to be interrogated, tiny bit. Yeah,
I mean, that's just an assumption that I'm making because when they are on Starkiller, she goes and wakes up. So I'm thinking she was knocked out the entire time.
Octu, the most unfindable place in the galaxy, was right here, less than a day's flight from where he kidnapped Rey.
Again, this isn't like turn left on Octo Avenue and it's just south of where he is. Let me contextualize this by saying, referring to the prequels with Dexter, Jetster, and Obi-Wan, when he says that Kamino is something parsecs south of the Rishi Maze, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah, what is south?
But even then, within the context of the Rishi Maze, it must mean something, right? So if you're talking about like cardinals or tertiary directions within a sector, it makes sense. But if you're looking at this 2D flat map and you're like, oh, it's just right there.
Also, he's not trying to get the map to Luke Skywalker. He's just trying to read her mind. You know, he's trying to get any information he can on anything.
I guess that's why they were trying to get the pieces of the map.
Yeah. So it's not like he can hear, oh, it's here, I'll just navigate there. No, it's not there. It's not something you can navigate to. That's like trying to use Google Maps, but the place is not on Google Maps.
Also, remember that thing about precise calculations? Hyperspace lanes, anyone?
We were right there, man!
To make this crystal clear, if Kylo had interrogated Rey aboard his ship while still in orbit over Takodana, he could have literally shown up to stupid Octu with his stupid Star Destroyer and blasted stupid sad old Luke off his stupid little island with one stupid turbo laser blast, all before the stupid resistance even made it back to their stupid
He also
base.
wouldn't know where on the planet Luke was, even if he did find the planet somehow. But that's
assuming you can see Octo from Takodana.
Yeah, but he's also literally on a mission.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't be able to do anything until he finished the mission that he was currently on. Like
Falcon through a planetary defense shield and into the planet's atmosphere. No, I feel like I've laid enough groundwork at this point for you to see how incomprehensibly retarded this move is, so I'm not even going to bother breaking it down.
Don't, because they know how impossibly stupid and risky this thing is, and when Leia is like Han, how, and he's like, you wouldn't like the answer, right? It's literally a risky maneuver, and when he's and when he is synchronizing with Chewie, I was about to say with Wookiee, when he's synchronizing with Chewie and he goes, now he's turning off the safety protocols for approaching a gravitational body, like it is, in my mind, a force sensitive move by Han, but I digress. That's headcanon. It is risky, but he pulls it off. He's Han Solo. And that's Chewie. Like, they perform some ridiculous feats with the Falcon.
Yeah, it's not a bug, it's a feature. That is something that has always bothered me a bit, though, but I don't ever bring it up because usually these guys don't ever bring that up.
Suffice it to say that this is an impossibility. And
it's not impossible. It is.
He did it.
Dangerous. Everything that happens in fantasy is, like you said earlier, it's impossible until it's done.
The Last Jedi squelched its way into theaters in 2017 and laid its disgusting, desecrated corpse before us. And since then it has...
You're laying your disgusting, desecrated corpse on Star Wars right now.
King and Kamikaze have been so thoroughly dissected that its criticisms are practically rote at this point. Oh, and by the way, that throwaway line in The Rise of Skywalker about the Holdo maneuver being a 1 in a million shot actually makes this scene worse, not better. See, if you were actually paying attention to the words you were writing, JJ, you'd have realized that a 1 in a million chance of this move destroying the First Order's fleet means the other 999,999 times Holdo escapes into hyperspace unharmed.
Also,
it's got a Hail Mary.
I also don't think he understands how probability works. Just because it's a 1 in a million shot doesn't mean that all of those other chances are a miss.
That's also correct.
It's an idiom. It's a phrase. Like saying a half court shot is 1 in a million. Just like, casually doesn't mean that it is literally 1 in a million. The shot on the Death Star in A New Hope, as Han says, was a 1 in a million shot.
Yeah, but also if you shoot, if you're at the buzzer and you have the ball and you're down, you throw it, and sure, odds are you're gonna miss it, but you still try. That's the whole point. Like, it doesn't matter what the odds are. And saying like, oh well, if she missed, then she would have escaped. Then, like, yeah, she would have tried something and it didn't work. That's what would have happened. But, like, doesn't mean you don't try.
But also the whole point of Beaumont saying it was a 1 in a million shot is because is to paint the picture that the circumstances were so right for that to happen.
Yeah.
Not that it's 1 in a million, but she just so happened to line up with everybody, and everybody was focused on the escort ships, that the conditions were met. It doesn't mean that she had landed on that 1 out of a million she needed.
Yeah, so just for everyone watching, just a real quick run through with the Holdo maneuver. It's really hard to pull off. It's really easy to defend against. You have to have, like we had discussed, hyperspace lanes. So you have to have a jump programmed, and then you have to. So that's like aiming a sniper rifle way in the distance, and then trying to move something to be in the way of that to hit it, right? That's going to be exceedingly difficult. They could have shot her out of the sky very easily, but they weren't focused on shooting her. They weren't running with shields because all power was running to their engine so that they can try to keep up.
As soon as they noticed, Hux was like, fire on that ship. Like, they knew what they
also,
had to do.
the hyperdrive jump that was plotted was actually the same one that was plotted by Poe earlier when he got stunned. So that's the hyperspace jump that was already plotted. So like it was exceedingly difficult and rare for something like that to be pulled off because of how easy it is. Like literally, ships in Star Wars can see when someone else's hyperdrive is spooling up.
Yeah.
So you could just shoot it.
They're jumping to hyperspace.
You know what I mean? Like, it would be really easy to spread out your fleet. Like, also, the damage it does to the fleet doesn't take out the whole fleet, by the way. And they have a crap ton of forces and ships left. It also doesn't, like, it scuttles the ship, but almost everyone on that ship survived too.
Including Rey.
That's the other part. Like,
but also, it's not the jump that does the most severe damage. It's the shields of the Raddus. All of the damage occurred with the entrance velocity of hyperspace and the shields of the Raddus. And the 1 in a million refers to all of the conditions lining up almost perfectly for that to happen. It doesn't mean that it's a miss 999,999 times out of a million. I feel like when he plays gacha games, he wants a character to drop at exactly 10%. Like, you know, like when a character's probability is at 10% in a loot table, he wants the character to drop at 10 out of 100 pulls. That's what he wants.
Yeah.
As far as the hyperspace tracking goes, God, how nice must it have been for Ryan to just invent this god-tier piece of tech.
It wasn't invented by Ryan.
Yep.
It was introduced in Tarkin, wasn't it?
In Rogue One as well. Like, this is... Yeah, it's technology that they were working on. And, of course, they were working on it because the rebels would do stuff and then jump into hyperspace.
With zero forethought about how it impacts the galaxy moving forward. Never explain how it works or where it comes from, and then just piss off and go make terrible detective movies for Netflix.
But also like, oh, but you didn't explain how it worked. Where do they explain how anything works in any place in Star Wars, right? Like, and they eventually do explain how hyperspace tracking works.
I just made a video about this, but like when you harp on somehow Palpatine returned and you completely forgive Leia, you're my sister. Somehow I've always known. yet you kissed Luke. See, that's the thing. It's like we didn't care about that stuff. It's like, oh, I guess, she sensed it in the Force. Whatever. It doesn't matter. We don't need those explanations.
It even has 4 big boobs on it. We all know how much you enjoy that imagery, you boob. Now, instead of allowing myself to devolve into madness, thinking about...
You have already devolved into madness.
All the stupid...
I've devolved into madness watching this
garbage.
garbage.
Back to hyperspace travel and explore the geography of this movie, because geography can't drive you mad, right? Right? So, as previously established, Dakar, the Resistance base, is located here. This is where the Resistance is trying to escape from at the beginning of the movie.
I can tell your map is wrong because Dakar is not where the arrow is pointed. Because Dakar doesn't exist on that map.
Crate, the definitely not Hoth planet that they end up on, is here. Of course, Octu is over here with sad Luke and
Correct.
Rey,
It's
and
not Hoth.
that's it. Oh, wait, Cantobite. Of course. How could I forget this very important and impactful side quest? Silly me. Now, where is that little guy? How? Why?
How
could you...
I mean, like, the easiest way I can describe it to you is if you take the galaxy and go like this to it, then it's not a plane of travel. It is a galaxy.
It's a galaxy? Yeah.
Do this? How could you think this is okay? Cantobite is literally a galaxy away.
I mean, if I were to very, very simply globalize this galaxy, Cantonica is next to everything because of how, you see where I'm going with this? If I actually did,
the map is not the territory, right? Like all of these are not on the same plane, and you just look at how galaxies work.
I'm just saying, like, just for funsies, if I were to make this a globe, then it would be like right there, like, because back here, and then it wraps around.
And you expect me to believe they flew there on this? That's over 100,000 light years in an escape
Again, your metrics is whack.
pod. Do you have any idea?
That's an
how much
escape
time
pod.
that
That's
would
not
have
what
taken?
they're in.
My man, General Grievous's starship is a fully fledged starfighter that's twice as big as this little peanut, and it only has a Class 6.
Hold
hyperdrive.
on.
What the?
No, that thing is way bigger than General Grievous's ship. Like way bigger.
Also, they didn't leave the planet in that. Remember, DJ takes another ship.
Need a left?
4 parsecs to go. This thing really clicks.
That might have a class 1.8 to brag to their rich friends.
Fisted critique of capitalism into that particular sector. Hot.
So you're unaware of the corporate sector in Legends. You're unaware of the Zerka Corp. I mean, they all existed.
Hot damn, what a stupid movie. The fact that they're meant to arrive there and get back to the fleet in a matter of, hours?
You see that what they get back to the fleet,
like he just showed it.
Different ship.
Get back to the fleet in a matter of.
You can already tell that there's two sublight engines.
The hyperspace drop-off is cringe for sure, but not world-breaking. Not nearly as world-breaking as this or this.
None of them are world-breaking.
It's something that happens when people have a specific headcanon, and then the next generation of films come out and it conflicts with what was in their head.
This is getting really long. We've already established that the entirety of his arguments from the beginning to this point is completely bunk. He's working off a data set that is erroneous, fallacious at worst. And no, not at worst. I mean, it's just wrong. It's just wrong. I'm gonna skip ahead to the closing remarks and see if there's anything substantive.
And bounce around from Navarro to Mandalore to Tatooine in an afternoon. Who would take issue with Ahsoka flying through hyperspace in the belly of a whale for what appears to be only a couple of hours and ending up in another galaxy? Why is everyone complaining that one of the characters in the Acolyte isn't even supposed to exist yet?
They didn't know about Ki-Adi-Mundi's birthday until they looked up the Legend's date of birth. This is why Max of Zorro is the latest entry in the Carpet Nugget Kingdom, because he's a complete parrot of everything that we've heard from that side of the grassy knoll, and has zero original thoughts other than his arbitrary measurement system of the galaxy's distance on a flat plane using noodles, and using a 192,000 light year span of which there's no source.
This is Star Wars. It's meant for children. A stormtrooper
Yeah, that's the first true thing that you've said this entire video.
bonked his head in 1977, so nothing matters anymore. This is the sort of nihilistic attitude you see in the writing for the Disney Plus shows. And it's...
No, the nihilism is coming from this video.
Yeah, right?
stems directly from the incompetent handling of the sequel trilogy. I know I sound like a broken record, but the onus really does lie with these three creators. They set the tone for what is acceptable according to new canon.
No, George Lucas set the tone for what's acceptable, and the story group has followed it to the T.
Which he admitted specifically in the prequels that this happens. He said that A New Hope takes place in one day, for no goddamn reason. I don't.
Yeah, everything is a supposition with this video, or a presumption that
They handed those controls to someone who views this property as his own personal playground. Someone who has...
What? He learned from George, and now he's in George's position.
No respect for all the work that people like George, Alan Dean Foster, Timothy Zahn, Michael A. Stackpole, Kevin J. Anderson, and so many others put into expanding this galaxy. Someone who's willing to hire activists instead of artists.
When is she an activist? Like, she's an artist. Like, Russian Dolls was critically acclaimed, and that's what she did right before The Acolyte. Like,
yeah, but there was zero activism during the promotion of the show, and there was zero activism present in the show. It's this like anti-woke boogeyman. Something that they do all the time with these videos is they are both the victim and the victor. They, on one end you have this massive liberal majority that is forcing diversity, DEI, and wokeness into their films, and it's an oppressive force. And then on the other hand, it's go woke, go broke. We're the majority that you should be catering to. So which is it? Are you guys being oppressed by this large woke machine, or are you guys the true champions of what should be? And they are
anti-art. That's what they are. They are anti-art.
To the very first writer's room for The Force Awakens.
Of which George Lucas was a part of.
And yeah. I don't think any of this can be salvaged. All Star Wars really needs to regain their audience is a few good stories told competently, even if the scope and scale of those stories is simple. It's
the first thought in this 39-minute video that I've agreed with, conceptually and intellectually, to which I'm going to respond now by saying you've spent the last 39 minutes of your life filming this, or maybe even more time filming this and recording this and editing this, all to end up being the only one who has broken hyperspace lore. You make this grand proclamation that Disney has broken hyperspace lore with the sequels, when by virtue of your distance numbers, your measurements, your time length, your your time lapses in certain sequences being completely and utterly wrong, and in most cases arbitrary, you are the one that's breaking hyperspace lore. And I hate to
this
say
video
that.
was just dumb. He goes on a weird like anti-socialist like rant, and then like raves about Andor at the. I don't get it, man.
Well, I mean, that's the end of this video. I mean, the closing remarks about, you know, the stories not needing intergalactic consequence, or, you know, stuff like Andor.
Agreed.
That's serviceable remarks.
Agreed.
But the rest of it is just complete and utter carpet nugget. So, I mean, if you run into Max of Zorro on your YouTube feed, remember he's a carpet nugget. Remember, it's a carpet nugget, and so tread carefully so you don't step on it and hurt your foot or something. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with Hyperspace at its current state. Disney didn't break it. All of the answers are there in the movie for you to have it, you know, sufficiently explained to you. And everything in this video was kind of pointless, to be honest. And I hate that we spent this time reacting to it, but I realized the necessity for it because it has gotten 45,000 views, and that's 45,000 potentially impressionable people getting the wrong information about Star Wars lore. And as always, whenever we speak about Hyperspace or any kind of lore in Star Wars, we're always going to give you our citations, and we're always going to give you the actual copy, the actual literature, and never editorialize. We'll always tell you when it's our headcanon. Whenever we answer something in lore as Loremasters, we will provide the actual text. Videos like this and claiming things have been broken or something like that, because we're definitely reacting to the lightsabers video.
Final thoughts is like what you want to like, you know, watch things for enjoyment. If to spread hate you have to try and scientifically prove and then get so much stuff wrong. Like I got so excited when he mentioned Allegiance because I love that book, and then he was wrong. Like I can't even, just because someone makes videos doesn't mean they know what they're talking about. That like there's literally a team that manages the story group. They manage the continuity. They manage the planets and their location and what's possible and what's not possible. And that's why it works. These people's understanding is just bad.
Also, he went on to list a whole bunch of like authors of the expanded universe. Timothy Zahn writes for the quote-unquote new canon. Alan Dean Foster wrote the Force Awakens novelization. There's a lot of authors that are still there.
There's this weird idea where people are like, oh, well, it's not what the majority of people want. And like the sequel trilogy were a bunch of billion-dollar movies. Like they were wildly successful. And it's like, what do you want?
Tread softly when you're watching videos like this. Even videos from us. Always make sure that we're citing our sources and giving you the actual canon text. But for the most part, a lot of these videos just kind of editorialize and make it seem like they know what they're talking about, but they don't. Hyperspace is fine, and it's not broken. With that said, don't forget to subscribe for more videos. Hit the like button if you like this video, and hit the dislike button if you dislike this video, because we welcome that too. Conformity is not our thing. Only intellectually honest conversation. That's it. On to the next one.
For life.
We are all in hyperspace for a day and a half.
Yeah, and may you get where you need to go in hyperspace at the speed of plot.